Good morning, everybody. My name is Christy Tooker. I'm with Questar Assessments, and also on the phone with me is Heather Klusendorf from State Ed. I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping before I turn it over to Heather. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please chat them in via the questions box. We have several people on the line that can answer your questions while Heather continues on with the presentation. If we see any hot topics, we will stop and talk through those hot topics. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Heather Klusendorf.
Hi there. Good morning. Good morning, New York. So here we are. This is the final roadshow presentation. You can't see us, but we're a lot of fun on stage, lots of hand movements. So we just want you to try and imagine them. But when we've got somebody running slides, so Amanda, if you could take us to the next slide. Oh, might be a delay there. Okay, so this slide, first of all, I want everyone to know that you can follow along with us online. If you do not know CBT support, you need to, if you do not know CBT support, you need to be familiar with it. This is your one-stop shop for all your CBT needs. We post lots of articles, we post training information. This is where you register for various road shows or for webinar trainings, okay? So everything's here. This is where you can, if you can follow the link on screen to get the presentation slides either in PDF or in PowerPoint. Now, for those of you that don't know, this is our Evangelical Fall Tour. I am from Alabama. So this presentation, this series that we do in the fall, it is an informational series. It is how do we turn your heart? How do we give you confidence that you can trust the CBT program? And what are we going to do to make sure that we don't encounter the technical difficulties that we encountered during CBT ELA last year? What we'll do is that while you're chatting questions, folks are collecting those questions. And if we see trends during the webinar, we'll stop and we'll talk about it. But this is your opportunity to ask us questions, to get those answers. And then also a little later in the presentation, Amanda Verdick from Questar, she will be talking a little bit about what is Questar doing this year to make sure that we have a good experience with performance for all of our CBT test takers this spring. Okay. So next slide. Okay. All right, so the agenda, this is online. We do follow it religiously, but I will tell you that we usually don't get down to the lessons learned. We stop for questions. We make sure that whatever is occurring among the attendees, they're getting those questions and that we're having conversations. We love to have conversations. The CBT team, we're here for you. We like to listen, but we also like to answer questions. Okay, so next slide. Okay, here we have the state map of New York, and this shows you where our CBT populations were last year. So what you can see is that we had a lot of CBT in this past year. The first year of the computer-based testing program in 2017, we had only 184 schools. That was 4% of the state. But last year, we had more than 650 schools. And we had some really good CBT populations in Long Island, in central New York, all of these places, western New York, and especially the capital region, the North Country. The students, they like testing on computer. And we're going to talk a lot about that today as we take a look at what the CBT program is going to look like in the next year. Okay. Okay, next slide. Okay. This breakdown of CBT schools by region, it shows you, again, that we have had a CBT presence in every region throughout New York State. Okay, so the regions, it's varied. The first year, the central New York region was our #1 area for CBT, and then Albany climbed into the lead last year with a lot of schools. Oops, one moment. Okay, with more than 140 schools. And we think that folks that have done CBT in the past, we believe that those schools will be coming back this year despite the technical difficulties. But one thing we want to emphasize here is that your regional information centers, they are your first level of support in the field. They have the experience with CBT. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is the 4th year of the computer-based testing program. We have the first year was a pilot. It was field testing on computers, and we had more than 60,000 students on computer. And then we had 184 in the first year of operational CBT. And then this last year, more than 650. But you'll see that the amount of students dramatically increased from the first year of operational with more than 28,000 students testing to year 3, which was this past year with 145,000 students taking the computer-based tests in grades 3 through 8, ELA and math. This is a lot of students. So we did have quite a lot of schools and districts new to CBT to support. And I'll tell you the trends is that those schools, those 184 schools, first of all of them came back after the first year of operational CBT. So in that 600, more than 650, all those 184 schools are represented. But what they did is the trend is that they added more subjects and more grade levels. Maybe they started out with, say, their grade 3, their babies. They started them out so that those students would never have to go back to computer. And then they added more subjects, more grade levels, and they expanded CBT in their school because they found out that CBT was simpler. Administrative-wise, it's just a win. And we will share with you what some districts and schools have said about CBT. Okay, next slide. Okay, there we go. So the computer-based testing program, we've had, this slide gives us a run, and we're going to talk through what has been the experience in the schools for every year of CBT. The first year that CBT field testing pilot in 2016, there were no major technical issues. It was a beautiful experience. The schools liked it. They found out that there was less paper, #NoPaper, that administratively it was a win, and that the students actually liked testing on computer. So in 2017, the first year of operational CBT, there was a minor glitch on the first day of operational CBT ELA window. On that first year, first day, within about the first hour, we realized that 64 third graders throughout the state had been served the 4th grade test. We had an issue with a unique identifier for grade 3 test, form N. As you know, there are more than 20 different forms for an ELA and a math test. And so that one form was serving students the wrong test. And we have 3 different scenarios for those students. So some of those students, they logged in, those third graders, and they took the 4th grade test all the way to the end. We're not supposed to tell you this, but those students, they did well. They did okay. But then we also had another category of students who logged in. They started taking the 4th grade test, and maybe they got the information from NICED, and they realized that they needed to stop taking the test, that it was the wrong test, and they were pulled out of that test. And then a third category of students were students where the proctor might have noticed immediately that those students were being served the wrong test, so they pulled them out of that test, right? So 3 scenarios. And in that, we worked with schools, we worked with parents. Parents actually got to make the decision if you had a 3rd grader who took that 4th grade test in its entirety, or even just logged in and saw that cover page, the parent got to decide whether or not the student on the next day or some other day in the testing window would take the 3rd grade test. But not only that, we worked with the schools to come up with a fair and valid score. How do we score these students? What if a student did completely take a 4th grade and a 3rd grade test? What do we do with those scores? So we came up with a lot of different variety in how we were able to score those students, work with the schools. We shared the methods for deriving a fair and valid score with the schools. And what we were there, what we want to emphasize is that we are flexible, right? We had to come up with new solutions outside the box that we'd never had before. Additionally, what we had to do is we had the opportunity where we could create new use cases, right? So we knew that we needed to test all the unique identifiers for all the forms. It's a no-brainer, right? But we built more, better use cases for these scenarios. And guess what? In the second year of operational CBT this past spring, we did not serve any students the wrong test. However, we did have another issue on the first day of CBT ELA. On the first day of CBT ELA, we had nearly 30,000 students throughout the state that were testing on computer. And those students, while they were testing, they encountered a technical failure on Questar's end. It was a performance issue, and Amanda will tell you a little bit more about it later today, or in about 2 slides. But on April 11th, 2018, students either they encountered where they couldn't submit the test, they encountered where they couldn't log into the test, and some of those students were also logged out of the test, booted right out of the test. So we had a variety of different scenarios for what the students encountered. Now our schools and our students, they handled it really well. We hoped that this wouldn't happen, especially after the first day of CBT ELA, which was April 10th, 2018. It was a beautiful day. Students throughout the state, they logged in, they took the test with hardly any technical issues at all. We were receiving phone calls from principals and superintendents congratulating us throughout the state. It was a beautiful experience. So we were really happy. And then obviously we were really sad the next day when things just didn't go as expected. So on April 11th, there was a technical failure from about 8:30 in the morning to 12 noon. And again, not all students throughout the state were affected in the same way. Like for instance, in Long Island, we had schools that didn't even encounter any technical issue. There was no blip in their radar. So we had to come up with different solutions for all of these students for what kind of technical issue did they encounter. And then on the second day, on the next day, April 12th, there was also another disturbance. There's a technical failure in the afternoon due to some performance testing that Questar was doing to try and identify the issues from the previous day. And then on the following week, on April 17th, Questar encountered technical failures in 5 states. So we had a lot thrown at us during the first 2 weeks of the operational CBT window, and we learned a lot. And so we're going to take a look on the next slide at what are the 5 lessons that NYSED learned and how are we preparing better for the next year. And there we are. Okay. So what we learned, first of all, and what we heard from national advisors from other states that have started the transition to CBT, but also completed that transition, is that technology happens, right? We know even as much as it is rare, Google goes down, Amazon goes down, Amazon Prime Day sometimes we can't get our orders through. So technology does happen, and we're not the first state in the United States to be making this transition to CBT. There are 40 other states that have large online assessment testing programs. So we're learning from these other states, and we're trying to adjust, we're trying to be flexible. But first, the first thing that we know that we have to do is we have to communicate and listen. So when we encountered the technical difficulties on April 11th, we started to send out Dear Principal letters. We sent out a Dear Principal letter, and we also posted information to CBT support that there was an issue, a technical issue currently with Questar. We tried to get out as much information as we could to as many people as we could. So in doing this and sending the Dear Principal letters, which sometimes we sent 2 or 3 a day, we are copying and pasting more than 600 emails for principals into an Outlook email form, and then sending that email to superintendents, to district test coordinators. Now, At NICED, we can only send 500 emails at a time. So this was not the most efficient way for us to be able to communicate. However, at the time, it was the only way that we had to communicate directly with our principals, our district test coordinators, and our superintendents. And this process, it took me about an hour to send out one of those Dear Principal letters, then to forward it on to the RIC working group colleagues, then to the RIC directors. It was quite time consuming. And as a result, we know that some of our schools didn't get the information that they needed in a timely enough manner. So we're going to talk about how we're going to fix that for this year, what we're going to do to improve that. But we're going to continue to communicate and listen to our principals and schools. We will always host our lessons learned and feedback sessions. During the technical issues that we were encountering during CBT ELA, we were having emergency meetings with our RIC working group colleagues. We were trying to listen and hear as much as we could about what was happening in the field, and our RIC sometimes told us things that weren't coming to us directly from principals. But we did have a lot of folks that emailed us directly. I believe I stayed up till 2 in the morning reading all the email and responding to principals on that first day, April 11th. And so we'll continue to have lessons learned. We will continue to share with you what did some schools do to streamline CBT. And we'll always have these fall roadshows where we're going to be frank, we're going to be transparent, and we're going to share with you what we're doing to improve the computer-based testing program. And I just want to remind everybody that while these are the information sessions in the fall, in the winter, in January and February, we will roll again across the state to do in-depth training into Nextera admin. Okay? But in the fall, it's a discussion, it's a conversation about what happened during CBT, ELA, and math. By the way, CBT math, we had solved most of the issues from CBT ELA, and it was a seamless administration. We were bored, which is good. We want to be bored. We want all our schools to be able to handle CBT on their own without us helping. So lesson number 2 is that we had to be flexible. Can we go back to the previous slide? Sorry, there we go. Okay. Lesson number 2 is we had to be flexible. So we had 9 primary testing days. However, we really only had 6. When we started to encounter the CBT ELA issues and students who had been booted out of their test on April 11th and then re-accessed their test to find that their student responses were missing, as a state, we had to think outside of the box. We had to be flexible. We had to realize that 6 primary testing days wasn't enough for our students to be successful, because recovering those missing responses, sometimes that took more than 24 hours. Sometimes we even had scenarios where students logged in when they were told that their responses had been promoted back into their computer-based test, and then they went missing again. So we had a lot of different scenarios that we had to deal with. And I know that most of you out there, you're thinking, well, it's the state. The first thing you think is flexible, right? Okay, maybe you don't, but you will now. From here on out, the state, we are trying to be flexible, transparent. And so we started talking about 9 primary testing days instead of 6. And then when we got to day number 8, we started thinking maybe we need to extend that window. And we did. We extended the CBT ELA window by 3 days. Right? So we had to think of new solutions. How can we make sure that our students throughout New York State have the time that they need to be able to complete their computer-based tests? And number 3, we had to find better ways to communicate. We knew that sending Dear Principal letters, 500 at a time, to all these different groups throughout the state, we knew it wasn't efficient. One way that we knew it wasn't efficient is that on April 17th, when Questar encountered the failures in 5 different states, we worked with Questar throughout the day. We also worked with their cloud provider to figure out what was happening. Why were we encountering these technical failures again? And as a result of that, at 10 o'clock at night on April 17th, we sent an email, a Dear Principal letter, where we advised the state, hey, dear schools, if you're planning on testing tomorrow on April 18th, maybe you wait. Maybe you take a moment and you don't test first thing in the morning. Maybe you wait until 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock that morning to start your test sessions. Or guess what? Maybe you don't test on April 18th. Let's see how it all shakes out. Because we, as a state in New York, we weren't confident that Questar, after the multiple failures, that testing was going to go all right. So we told our principals, we told our district test coordinators, maybe we hold off. However, we sent that at 10 o'clock at night. And the next morning, not all schools got that message first thing in the morning. Maybe the principal didn't forward it, or perhaps the principal just didn't get it. Maybe it went to their spam filter. So we encountered those kind of scenarios, and we knew that we needed a better way to communicate. We need to be able to communicate directly with those school test coordinators, with those technology coordinators, the folks that are in the trenches, in the school, walking the hallways, communicating directly with the proctors. So what we've done this year is we are collecting up to 5 additional contacts. One moment. Right. Up to 5 additional contacts via the CBT Technology Readiness page on Nextera Admin. So what we're hoping is that principals, when they complete technology readiness, that what they're doing is they're adding technology information coordinators, that they're also adding their school test coordinators, because we don't have a way to know who those people are. The only information that we have about users in a school or a district is what we get from CEDREF. CEDREF is our educational database for organizations and what have you. Do we have a question? Okay, what's our question? Let's see here. All right, so we've got a question. We're just going to stop here real quickly. Okay, so if a student completes the first day of the exam and submits it, but the system loses their exam, should we just wait 24 hours to see if the exam is located, or should we have the student take the test over? This is a great question. Okay, first of all, we never want our students to take a test twice. Okay, so we're not retesting students. We want our students to have a good experience. If indeed a student's responses go missing again, and now we're going to tell you, how can you trust us that that's not going to happen this year? But during any CBT administration, there are always examples of, say, 3 students at the most who may have lost responses because, say, maybe their computer died and it didn't connect to the Questar database, it didn't have an internet connection, and the computer died. So there have always been these perfect storm scenarios. But there is a recovery process that Questar has created where it can pull the students' responses that are cached locally on the student's computer. So a school should always wait. If responses go missing, communicate with Questar, communicate with NICED, and we'll go through a recovery process that will actually promote those student responses back into the student's online test. Okay, go. All right. So all right, that's fine. All right, we're just looking at some chat questions here real quickly. Okay, so as a reminder, students never retest. Okay, and now to get back to better ways to communicate, we are collecting up to 5 additional users via Tech Readiness. Not only that, we're using the CBT operational listservs. We always had a listserv, but the listserv is really like, it's a weekly communication. It's called CBT This Week, and it's for sharing training opportunities. It's for sharing new content on CBT support. Well, this year, something that we did during CBT Math, but we really didn't need it, is that we created operational listservs. As soon as your school orders operational CBT, we will be adding those users to the operational listserv. Okay, this means that we'll be able to communicate effectively, efficiently, and all at once with all users that need it. When principals add additional users via Tech Readiness, such as their information technology coordinators, those folks will also be added the operational CBT listservs. During field testing on computers, we launched CBT Today. CBT Today is a location on CBT support, and folks can sign up to be subscribed to get an email from this content section, but we'll have another CBT Today. It will provide the status. What is the health of the Questar servers today? Are they good? We believe they're going to be good the whole time, but still, this provides you with a little more confidence that everything is okay, that NYSED and Questar, we are monitoring those servers. And not only that, we're going to provide like a tip of the day. We're seeing trends throughout the state. Maybe there was something that was confusing for folks during operational CBT math, right, that they needed to know. This is where we'll try to provide helpful tips of the day. Okay, and so then, so for those principals that have already ordered CBT, you've received your VIP. Please come and complete tech readiness. As a result of that, you'll see this new section, and we're going to show you in a few more slides what this new section looks like on CBT support. And we've been asked the question, what if we have more than 5 people that we would like added to the operational CBT listserv? Just tell us, just email us. We're always here. So you can just send an email to CBT support. Those operational CBT listservs, they will be launched in January this year. So after the ordering system closes, then we will start to communicate. And one of the first messages that we will communicate with our schools is going to be about when the secure browsers are verified and confirmed to be the exact same secure browser versions that our schools will use in the spring. Okay. So lesson number 4, review all systems. Obviously, we reviewed all systems. Are we going to review more systems this year? What do I mean by that? Are we going to review external workflows? Are we reviewing how we can improve the recovery process? Because we had a lot of communication issues with the recovery process and getting that information back to schools. So we know now, as we learned with the ELA CBT glitch from year 1, where we served 64 third graders a 4th grade test, we now have very specific use cases, right? We know what a traffic pattern looks like in New York versus a traffic pattern in Questar's other states. Some of Questar's other states, like Mississippi and Tennessee, their testing windows aren't 6 days, they're 6 weeks. They're a lot longer, so the traffic patterns are different. So we're learning as we go along, and we're fine-tuning those systems. We're also going to develop better contingency plans this year. Okay, so did we have a contingency plan yet last year? Yes, of course we did. But our contingency plans were really about how do we ship paper to a school that has lost all internet connectivity. Okay, so we did not have a contingency plan that was if all of Questar systems go down, what then? Okay, we will definitely have one this year. Questar always had the recovery process, but again, it had the recovery process that was for 1 to 2 to 3 students per administration. It was not a recovery process that was scaled up to provide support en masse. So we are absolutely going to develop better contingency plans this year, so that we're not in the place that we were last year. We are here to support. On that point, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda, who is going to comment and provide more details about how can you trust Questar this year. Okay.
Thanks, Heather. Yep. Thanks, Kiara. Good morning. My name is Amanda Verdick. I am the state director for the New York program at Questar. I come from about 15 plus years of assessment experience working with a variety of states, and more recently, as states have started to transition from paper-based testing to computer-based testing, I've been involved in helping with that transition. I've always been in a public-facing role, helping the state and schools and districts as they've administered tests and gone through the transition to computer-based testing. So last year was, I'd say, one of the most trying administrations I've experienced, but it was nice to work closely with the folks at SED, and we all tried to work together to get through the issues we experienced with ELA, support the field, schools and districts, and try and move forward. And as Heather noted, we did have a successful, boring math administration and field test, and that's our goal going forward. So what happened during the ELA test? As Heather noted, on April 11th, a number of students who were in the midst of testing, trying to get into the test, or trying to submit their test, were shut out of the system. Questar pretty quickly identified that a security flag had been tripped and the system had been shut down because it believed that it was being hit with a significant increase in the number of students testing. Turned out that was a bug, but because that bug made it appear as if there were suddenly many more students testing than we expected, the security and everyone was shut out of the test. So once we immediately took off that security and assumed that testing would be able to get underway again. In many cases it did, but in the time that the system was down, we created a large backlog of technology requests trying to move through the system. So when that security flag was removed, everything pushed through at once. And again, we saw some residual effects throughout the day and into the next day where there were additional issues for students. We've worked since then to really look through our systems, clean that up, make sure that any bugs are addressed, that any performance issues, should they be encountered, that there's ways to catch up again, if you will, quickly afterwards and not experience any downstream residual effects. After the immediate fix was implemented, we did review our own systems internally, but we also hired a third-party auditor to come in and look at all of our systems, all of our code base, review everything from end to end and help identify places where we can make improvement, places where there are potentially some issues that we need to make changes to, and ideally just sort of smooth out all of our systems so that we have a high-performing student test interface as well as the Nextera administrators interface. So using that third party, we've made some changes this year, and additionally, because of some of the issues experienced last year, we've decided that this year our focus will be on stability, not adding new flashy features, which I know there are some improvements that some of you were looking forward to, but we are focusing this year on stabilizing the system, making sure everybody is comfortable and everything moves forward as it should. So through discussions with NYSED, we are making a few improvements, and Heather will speak more about those in upcoming slides, but we are also focused together as with the state on just stabilizing the system and ensuring that we have a smooth administration. Heather spoke a bit about the student response recovery process. This was implemented as students' responses started to go missing. They weren't seeing them in Nextera in the student testing platform, and administrators weren't seeing a record of their test in Nextera admin. All student responses are cached locally on the student's machine, so the recovery process is to retrieve those responses from the student's machine and get them logged back at Questar and associated to the student. As Heather mentioned, we've always had this process, but it's been for individual cases where the machine shut down, there was a loss of internet at a specific moment, and the students' responses weren't captured back to Questar. This widespread loss due to this performance issue bug really caught a lot of us off guard. We weren't prepared to scale up and run these responses in mass. So this year we have been working in conjunction with SED on better communication process for student response recovery. We will have a mechanism for principals and those in schools to know exactly where in the process of response recovery is. And we've also automated a lot of the process. It used to be a database person needed to go in and hunt through the database to find the students' responses. We're now running an automated script to pull those up each time a recovery is completed. And so we are working together, committed to move forward and try and improve this process should we have to use it on a large scale again. So I just, we cannot say that we'll never have another problem, but I think we are addressing the problems that we have had. We're reviewing our systems to really ensure that any other problems that we can stop, we are aware of and making changes to now. And we're working together with SED to move forward and have some contingency plans in place and better communication, as Heather noted, and hopefully work together to move through a smooth spring of 2019.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks.
Thanks for that. So on the tail end of that, I want to let folks know that, when we encountered the CBT ELA issues, Questar moved very quickly. They moved quickly to remove the burst filter that Amanda spoke about, to make sure that traffic could get through and that our students could test again. However, additionally, they sent us live humans, actual humans. They shipped humans from Apple Valley, Minnesota, so that we could have a presence on the ground for Questar technical support, where they went into the schools and they assisted a lot of our schools with running the recovery process on their student testing devices. So we really appreciated the support that they gave us. We did not feel like we had been stranded, and we worked around the clock. We did not sleep during CBT ELA. We worked around the clock to make sure that our schools had the information that they needed in order to continue testing. But additionally, we worked with Questar to try and make sure that CBT math went much better, and it did. It was a testament. What we want to hold on to that first day of operational CBT ELA, April 10th, and this next spring, every day will be April 10th. We believe that we've got all the issues identified and worked out. And now we talk about performance issues. We talk about how does the software work. Now we need to talk about, well, what do we do with these students? We have a lot of students that encountered technical issues throughout the state. As I noted, there were nearly 30,000 students that were testing that day on April 11th when Questar encountered technical failures. However, the scenario was not the same for all students. Not all students encountered a second software bug that resulted in their responses going missing. What had happened is there's a unique identifier that associates the students' responses as they're typing them and sending them via heartbeat up to Apple Valley, the database for Questar. There's a session ID, unique identifier, that associates those two things, making sure those students' responses are kept with their previous responses that have already been transmitted. And some of those responses, they were falling off. As a result of that second bug, some students encountered missing responses when they logged back into the test or when they paused the test. So what we did is we worked with our schools, and our schools, they reported students that encountered significant technical difficulties. Their responses had to go through a recovery process to show up again in the Questar secure browser. And our schools worked with the RICs, and the RICs collected lists of students that encountered significant technical difficulties. And for any schools that wrote into us at NYSED about students that encountered significant technical difficulties. So what we've got is we collected all those students, and throughout the state, we collected more than 2,000 students who had, as the school reported, encountered significant technical difficulties. And for every one of those students, more than 2,000, their test sessions were automatically marked behind the scenes with new data elements to indicate technical difficulties. So every student test record was marked with up to 4 different new data elements, such as in indicating that the student's test record went through recovery, or that responses were missing, or that the student was not able to complete the exam. They were not able to complete the test session and submit it. And a student could have a combination. They could have had, gone through recovery and also were not able to submit the test at the end of the extended CBT ELA testing window. Now, these new data elements, these aren't elements that folks out in the schools can see, right? They're behind the scenes. Your RIC, your Regional Information Center, they can see it. And they exist as part of the history, the life of that student test record going forward, right? So that test record is always marked for that student. Additionally, if a student encounters significant difficulties during session 1 or session 2, or maybe they encounter difficulties during both, there are also new data elements that indicate technical difficulties for individual sessions. Okay, so we've got a question that came in. Okay, so I'm just going to read them and stop here real quickly and answer this. So if a student loses their exam submission and not due to computer error, should the student not lose that same device for the second day if the test is not located by then? I'm not sure, Alicia, I'm not sure I understand that. So the student loses their exam submission, not due to computer error, should the student, maybe, are you asking perhaps should the student test on the same
Hey Heather,
question?
this is Christy. Let's see if Alicia can unmute her line.
Yeah, let's find out. Let's
Alicia, I'm going to
Alicia.
unmute you and see if we can talk quick.
I like that.
Alicia, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Hi.
You want to verbalize your question?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my computer glitched, ironically.
See, technology happens. Happen live.
Yeah.
Take it away,
So,
Alicia.
thank you. So if a student loses their exam after they submit it on their Chromebook, and the next day we still haven't heard if their exam was located, should they complete the test on a new device, or are they okay to use the same device?
Well, I think that what we learned last year, and you might have been in the throes of it with us, is that we first advised that students should log into that same testing device. This year, we have changed that communication, that you're trying to have the students log into a different testing device. However, in your case, where you noted that you hadn't heard back because, in 24 hours about those student responses, whether or not they were being recovered, that is one of the most significant changes that we are making regarding the recovery process. I don't know, were you doing operational CBT last spring?
Yeah, we were.
Yeah, okay. So what you had to do, if you remember, it was up to you. It was up to your onus to communicate with Questar and with SED regarding recovery. You should not have had to do that, right? All these things, this transmission, it's electronic. So this year, when you're going through a recovery process, we are automatically identifying that and communicating back with schools. So there should no longer be like a communication gap. There should no longer be like, where is that test session in recovery? We're trying to develop a 3-status scenario where, it's been accepted, we see your students' responses, they're being recovered, then a status where those responses are pending, and then also verifying, right? So if you remember last year, we told schools, have your students log in and check to see if their responses are visible in the secure browser. That was not a good experience at all. So we should know this. These things are electronic, right? So we learned a lot, and we are absolutely fixing that for this year. So you should not be in the dark at all if indeed, your student testing session has to go through recovery. Does that answer it? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome, no problem. And keep sending us questions. We'll, when topics get hot, we'll go ahead and stop, and we'll also, after I finish this AETI description, we'll take a moment and see if there are any other hot questions out there. Christy can always unmute folks. Okay. All right. Okay, so I've talked about those data elements that are behind the scenes that you can't see. What about those data elements you can see? So we did create a new administrative error technical issue. It's called AETI. And this code was created because we were advised by other states that had gone through technical difficulty scenarios during CBT. We were advised by our National Advisory Committee that this is a best practice when difficulties occur during CBT. And not only that, so we're getting advised that, but also we're in the middle of it, right? We're in the middle of the CBT ELA administration. And I got a call from a principal. And the principal tells me, the student's responses were lost. What do? I want to mark this test session now. I want to be done with it. We totally understood. And so we suggested, okay, why don't you mark that student test session as administrative error? That code exists. It's code 97 AE. And that principal said, whoa, Heather, no. I am currently trying to get a promotion. I am interviewing right now for a new position. And if I mark that student test session as administrative error, that follows me the rest of my life. That's a mark, that's a blemish on my record. And we were like, whoa, you are right. Because what's happening and what happened with these technical difficulties, this was not the same, such as serving a student, giving a student the wrong paper test. It's not the same scenario. This was a problem on our part. This was Questar and NYSED having technical difficulties, and the school should not be punished, right? The school should not, and a student shouldn't be punished. So what we did is we developed the new AETI. And the AETI is code 90 for those data nerds out there, and it does show up on the tested, not tested, the L2 RPT reports. Okay, so there's a new column that was added to those reports in August. So an AETI, essentially, it suppresses the student score, but the school continues to get that performance accountability credit for institutional accountability, because the student tested, and if something went wrong, it was out of the school's control. So the school gets credit for that student testing, the score is suppressed, and it's handled essentially the same as medically excused, if you want to think about that, if you can associate that. So out of the gate, we had nearly 200 students that were coded with an AETI because either they were not able to complete their test sessions or they didn't have enough responses that were recovered for which a fair and valid score could be derived. So we've got some students that automatically get AETI, and the principal can see that in the tested, not tested report. But then on August 27th, we sent an email to all principals of students that had significant technical difficulties. And we told them, hey, go out, take a look at your students' constructed responses on Nextera admin. Review. Is the work that you see there representative of what your student can typically do? Work with your teachers. Because here on Nextera admin, the constructed responses not only include in entirety what the student wrote, but also the raw score. So the schools could see this. And we absolutely had principals that wrote into us that provided such thorough reviews. Listen, I can see for this student, nicest ID, blah, blah, blah. We never want to share student names via email. I can see that this student did not get an opportunity to finish her exam. Her responses are not complete. What I can see is that she started typing notes, and she's got notes to herself in every constructed response box, but that is not her essay. And this is a high-performing student in my school. Would you please give this student an AETI? And every time that a school wrote to us, we granted that. No questions. Because our principals, they did exactly what we asked them to do. We asked them to please provide in writing a description of why this student deserves an AETI. And they did. And I'll tell you, our technical advisory committee, they told us that if we did this, there would be a run on the bank. Everybody, all of those 30,000 students will have a AETI request. But did they? They did not. There was no run on the bank. Instead, what we had is we had principals throughout the state that sent us thoughtful reviews. And we had a handful of AETIs requested at a handful of schools. It was not overwhelming. And our schools, in large part, they stood behind those student scores, knowing that technology happens. Okay. So now let's go ahead and stop. Do we have any questions out there, Christy or Clara, that you think that we should take a moment and address?
Not at this time. You can continue, Heather.
All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so after all that, oh my gosh, why CBT? Why the heck would we do it? Well, you would do it because your students like it. Quite frankly, listen to your students. Your students today, they want to work with technology. They like typing on computers. Our students, they tell us it doesn't hurt their wrist. Their hands aren't getting cramped from having to write. They like typing. And our students need to be able to graduate into a technologically savvy world. So the students like it. And how do we know this? Because every year of operational CBT, we have gone out and we have been invited to observe some students taking the field tests on computer. And if we're really lucky, at the end of that, we get to talk to some of those students. We get to hear from them, and they tell us the cutest things, such as no paper rattling during tests or rulers dropping to the floor. This is nothing. You know, rulers dropping to the floor, we wouldn't have thought of that. I mean, quite frankly, I'm nearly 50. I don't know what a 10-year-old student really wants when they're taking a test. But what they want is they want fewer disruptions in the classroom. They want to be able to concentrate. They want to be able to provide responses in a simple way, such as via typing. They don't like having the booklets to ruffle through and try and find what responses. Oh, we got a question. Question from the field real quickly. How many principals determined AETIs? It was fewer than 100. Fewer than 100. Okay. Here we go. All right. So next, and again, ask us the tough questions, folks. We are here to answer them. Oh, nope. Go back, Kiara. Sorry. We're still on why CBT. There we go. All right. So students like fewer disruptions in the classroom. Not only that, but the administrators and the students together, they both like the online testing accommodations, such as text-to-speech, where the robots speak to the students. Our students love it. They're like testing in the classroom along with their cohorts, their other peers. They've got headphones on. They're not being singled out. It's an equity scenario where students feel independent and they can be in that classroom with other students. No lost answer sheets. Wouldn't it be wonderful if no schools ever had to hunt down lost answer sheets again? Every year, the calls come in during any operational paper window. Lost answer sheets, lots of them. Scoring administration is simpler. Last year, we had more than 40 different scoring consortia throughout the state, and there are 5 testing vendors that also work and score tests with New York teachers in New York State. So what they like is that there are no test booklets to transport. We say score point, we won't break your back. So we don't have the scenario where a scorer is sitting down and say she's scoring maybe number 35. She has to open up a book. She has to get a book. She has to open it. She has to find number 35. She has to page turn. Then she gets to 35. It's labor intensive, and there's a lot of movement. But with ScorePoint, which is the scoring software that Questar provides for computer-based testing scoring, number 35 is just delivered automatically to a scorer. A scorer sits down. She selects that she's scoring grade 6, number 35, and number 35 just is served to her, one after another, 35, 35, 35. And you know what we find? What we've heard is that our scorers, they get into a rhythm. They get into a cadence. They like it. It's simpler. There's less movement. They're not disruptive. And our scorers, they're happier. And every scoring center that scored CBT last year reported that it cut scoring time in half. So the teachers, they're returning to the classroom quicker. They're returning to the classroom quicker, and they're happier. We want happy scorers, right? And on top of that, we've got electronic alerting from scorers, and we've got real-time reports that the scoring director can see. What this means is that when we go out, we travel the state, again, for ScorePoint training in March each year. And when you talk about this one scorer, her name is Lois. Lois is out there, and Lois isn't pulling her weight. She's sitting at the table scoring paper tests, and she might be scoring one response an hour while everybody around her is scoring, and they're going at a really good pace, and they're pulling their weight, but not Lois. And everyone sees Lois, right? Like some scorers, they're starting to get upset, and they don't know, should I say something? Should I not say something? But regardless, they're getting angry. They're becoming frustrated. They're angry with Lois. Did they turn her in? Did they say something? But with electronic alerting and real-time reports and ScorePoint, the scoring director, she sees Lois. She sees that Lois is only scoring one response an hour. And that scoring director is able to walk over, pull Lois aside, and maybe offer more training. Maybe Lois needs to know more about what it means to get a 2 or a 3 on a response. Maybe Lois is having a hard day. Maybe something else is going on. But what we have here is we have a scenario where those scores that, we're getting frustrated and they're on the verge of their seats. Do I speak up? Do I not speak up? They're not encountering those scenarios. We've got happier scores. Okay, next slide. So for those schools that want to take that first step into CBT this year, what we did last year is during the fall tour, we rolled out the transition checklist. These are 7 questions that a school can ask themselves and they can work through. And if you can answer these questions this year, this may be the year for you. Because I want to let everyone know we're not going back. Okay? So we're only going forward with CBT. We are, the state is dedicated and committed. The commissioner, like CBT, she wants it for all of our schools. And her goal is adaptive testing. Many of you have heard her say that. And we can't get to adaptive testing. We can't get to doing more cool things with technology and with CBT unless more schools start to take that first step. So what we want to encourage all our schools to try and test at least one subject, one grade on CBT. And these are the questions that if you can answer them, this might be your year. You need to determine scoring consortia, you need to work with testing coordinators, make sure that you have staff training, and make sure that you can work the technology readiness requirements. Okay, so here we've got a question. I'm going to stop here. How do you accommodate students with test red? What if the voice modulator isn't preferred for the student? Okay, or incorrectly pronounces words. Okay, so this is from Kelly Rowland. Thank you, Kelly. This is a great question. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history for text-to-speech. So for the test read accommodation, there are 2 different ways to deliver the accommodation to students. Either the robots can read to the student with headphones, which is called text-to-speech, or you can have a human reader, where you might have a group of 5 students and a human is reading the test to those students, and yet the students are responding on computer because we've got a system where we're pairing a paper test for a human reader with the student's online test. All of our students are being served Form A for text-to-speech or test read. And so the first year of text-to-speech, there were some issues with pronunciation, but more than that, what we heard is that the voice was too robotic. So last year, Questar made a change where the students all received the same voice. His name was Matthew. He had a velvety voice. We liked Matthew. Matthew also was fabulous at pronouncing all the words. We served the same pronunciation experience to all students throughout the state. However, Matthew had a fatal flaw. Matthew did not work if the internet connection was poor or if internet went down. And when we had a scenario like we did last year with the technical failures, that was a bad experience for our students. So in this next year, we are going back to the voice packs, where a student and the CSE, they may be selecting an individual voice pack for a student to hear the robots reading to them. And all computing devices, they all have multiple voice packs, right? They're all named after people. Like a Chromebook may have Carl and Bob and Anna. And a student has selected that voice pack for that they're used to using, say, during daily instruction if they're using text-to-speech software, okay? So this year, a student will be able to select their voice that they want to hear before, before launching the test, when they're, what they're using in daily instruction. And additionally, we work with Questar on all the pronunciations. And now this is our 3rd year of text-to-speech. We absolutely know what we're doing this year. We listen to every one of the operational tests, and there will be a preferred voice per computing device. But we try to make sure that the pronunciation is the same across all devices. But we also make style decisions, such as think about, how is an ellipsis read? Does the computer read ellipsis, or does the computer read ... How does a computer read a fraction? How does a computer read a parentheses and full stop punctuation? So all of those decisions are made for all of the text-to-speech voices and computing devices, so that we are trying to ensure that we're delivering an equitable situation to all the students throughout the state. Does that answer the question, Kelly? Okay. I'm just reading here. Okay, let's see here. I know that the IEP accommodations have to be entered manually before testing. They do, that's true. But can tests be read to students electronically for math if indicated on his or her IEP? Yes, they can. So the IEP is what guides how a test is delivered. IEP, the test accommodations. So an IEP is basically the guide, right? It's that decision maker for how a student is taking the test. Okay, all right, so we're gonna get back to, so talk about the transition checklist, and next slide, we got coming up. All right, for those schools out there, those folks that are watching, maybe you've never seen the ordering system. Ooh, here's the sorcery. This is what it looks like. So these are screenshots, the next two slides, of the CBT ordering system. Last year, we added a new section on the home page, the landing page of the ordering system, where a school will indicate, yes, I am requesting operational computer-based testing. And when they do that, next slide, the next thing that a school needs to indicate is, how are you going to have your test scored? Okay. There it is. So here you can see in the middle of the screen, once a school indicates, yes, they're going to be administering the operational CBT tests, then they indicate what kind of scoring consortia they're going to have. And note that on the bottom, the last option is pending. So a school can still order. You too can order your CBT today and make those decisions about how you're going to have your test scored a little later. When you mark it pending, at the Office of State Assessment, we're watching all of those orders. We're watching them, and we'll contact you if you still have a pending scoring consortia a little later in November. And you know, maybe you need some help, maybe you have some more questions, but we're going to work with you, because operators are standing by. Not really, they're not standing by, but if you need help, we're here for you. And on the next slide, we'll show you what the scorers see when they're scoring a computer-based test, right? So this is a great example. This is a scorer has the ability to see the computer-based tests, the answers, the responses as the student enters them. But also, if you take a look on the upper right, you see a little box that says display item. And what that means is that if that's clicked, then the scorer just sees the raw text. They don't see the user interface like the Nextera test delivery system. And we talked a little earlier about that cadence, that rhythm that scorers get into. We found out that scorers stopped looking at the user interface. They were scoring quicker just looking at the raw text, because they know what they're looking for, right? They're in a rhythm. And you can see that the scorers can enter all the scores that they can see that they could use in a paper-based scoring world on computer. And then they just click score and next. Score number 35, 35, 35. So for those, one more point about ordering, after a principal indicates that they do want CBT, they indicate their scoring consortia, then a school principal is indicating quantities. How many students do you need for your grade 3 ELA CBT test? Similarly to how they order paper-based tests. But additionally, on top of that, they are still indicating test read quantities, right? So it's the same as ordering in paper. And you're also indicating if you have students testing in math on alternate languages like Spanish or Russian, you're still indicating those quantities. If you have students that are testing in a low incidence language, such as Turkish or French, then you're ordering test read quantities, right? Because those students are testing via oral translation, and they're testing on paper test copies, okay? Now, before we go to the next section, Christy, are there any questions out there that we need to stop and take a moment for?
Hi, Heather. Can you look at this one from Kirsten?
Okay, Kirsten. Oh, there it is. Okay, here we go. So, Kirsten, for private schools that currently mail tests back to district for scoring, what will we choose for the scoring for CBT? Well, Kirsten, what you're going to do is you're going to work with your district. First of all, in CBT, it's a little bit different. You're going to be scoring those tests. So if your students are taking computer-based testing in your school or in your district, you are responsible for scoring those tests. So it's a little bit different than the paper world. So you will need to work with them, and most likely your district is already familiar with the way that things kind of change for CBT. And your district may also be scoring CBT additionally. But you can also reach out to us, tell us who that district is, and we can maybe provide you with options or more information. Okay, what do we got that? All right. So Clara, anything else you think that we should answer now?
Sure,
Oh,
Heather.
please repeat the information about translators and type of test. That one, Clara?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so for CBT math, if the student can order, if a school can order a test on paper for a student for CBT math, such as the 5 alternate languages, that is, let me get these right. Here we go. I'm going to test my knowledge. Chinese, Korean, Russian, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. Then the student can test on computer. And the question sampler has those practice tests now for those 5 alternate languages. However, if a student is testing in a low incident language, such as Arabic, Turkish, French, those students currently are not testing on a paper test. They're testing on a paper test via oral translation. The test scenario will be the same. And so therefore, if you do have low incidence languages, you would indicate the number of students in your test read quantities when ordering tests in the ordering system. Okay. Anything else, Clara?
Hi, Heather. How about Lauren Davis?
Okay, Lauren Davis. See here. All right. How have the percentage passing results varied to previous paper-based testing once schools have chosen to use CBT? Has there been a large increase, decrease, relatively unnoticed? And so, Lauren, I think that you're talking about scores, yes? Meaning percentage passing and proficiencies. So, Lauren, first of all, you get a bonus point. There are 2 questions that if folks ask during our presentation that we award points. They are invisible. They will be coming to you, though. Don't worry. And this is one of those. Is there a change? Is there a dip in test scores when students transition from paper to computer? The answer is yes. This is a national trend. You can find articles out on the Google about it. Park has been very prominent as far as vocalizing these trends. And we want to let you know that the reason that there is this noticeable dip, and we do make adjustments. So you can find the comparability study for the last 2 years on the Office of State Assessment website on their technical reports page under 3 through 8. And so each year we compare groups of students that test on paper to groups of students that test on computer. And both years there's been a dip, and so we adjust scores. We give points to students who are testing on computer. For instance, last year in 2017, there was an adjustment as much as 8 points in one grade. However, this year, that gap is closing. And so the highest adjustment that was made in this past year was 2 points in 2 different grades. And there were also 2 grades where there was no adjustment necessary because students scored the same on computer versus paper. So you can find that comparability study, and we want folks to know that this adjustment is necessary because in New York State we're flexible and we allow for this choice. We allow for some schools to choose paper and some schools to choose computer. As long as that is happening, there will always be a comparability study, and we will always adjust in the way that we need to. And it's possible that, you know, a couple of years from now, we may be adjusting for paper instead of for our students who are testing on computer. But what I urge you to do is I you know, for any schools that are thinking about taking that first step, talk with your RIC, your Regional Information Center, and see if you can speak with a school, one of those 184 schools that have been with us over the past 2 years, and find out, you know, what did they do when they saw that there was a dip in test scores? What did they do to make sure their students were more ready? Because it's a typical scenario that occurs. And we're going to continue to look at it, and we're going to continue to do what we need to make sure that our students aren't unfairly, say, penalized via scores. Okay. Anything else, Clara? What else do you see out there?
Heather, why don't you keep going, and we'll come
right.
back to you.
All right. Okay, next slide, guys. Where are we? Let's see here. Okay. Seeing a delay on my end, Clara, where the next slide isn't coming up. Okay.
Heather, do you
Clara,
see
you guys? No, I don't. I still see score point slide. So we're on to the tech readiness. All right. Well, I'll start talking about tech readiness, hoping, but I'll let you know when I actually see it change out here in the field. Not seeing it change. Okay. All right. So maybe can we ask for a show of hands if folks are seeing the tech readiness slide? Christy?
Yes, people are seeing it, Heather.
Oh, they are. Okay. So, hey, that's fine. It's me. That's okay. I'm okay with that. I can do this from memory, but I will go ahead and pull the slides up on my end. Okay. Okay, so tech readiness. All right, so this is pretty exciting. So technology readiness, this is our second year launching this for, or third year launching it for our operational schools. And just so you know, all principals in that order CBT, they are required to verify CBT technology readiness. Okay, so tech readiness is a web page on Nextera Admin that has 10 requirements that schools must verify this year. Okay, and every year we add to this. Every year we try to make it better. That's right, this year there are more links than ever. There's more guidance than ever before. We're pretty excited about this because we have actually, we've been commended by other states that have transitioned to CBT regarding our technology readiness, because it really is a thorough guide for the things that a principal needs to have ready in the school, such as going through and counting how many computing devices do I have? Do I need to have more than one testing session in the morning? For instance, if you're a school, you've got 60 students and you've got 40 testing devices. You may need to run 2 test sessions in the morning for your students to be able to test them all on computer. Because the #1 requirement this year is that all students in a grade level must test on the same test session on the same day on consecutive days. That is the #1 requirement for all of CBT. Okay, so we put that at the top this year. That is a change. In the past, it was just guidance, and maybe it wasn't exactly clear, so we updated that. We've got a section where a principal needs to indicate how many computing devices do you have, and what are you using? And we're collecting this. We know that this information is collected via Beds Day. Schools are also indicating it on their technology readiness, or I'm sorry, their district technology plans. But for CBT, we're collecting it just for CBT because you are our operational schools. And when you write to us and you're just asking us some random question about CBT, we're actually looking up what devices you use. And if we find that perhaps your school is using iPads and we know that there was an update that was just released or there was new information provided by Apple, we're actually looking that up and providing it back to you. Just FYI, we're going to answer your question first, but then we're going to make sure that you have all the information that you need. So it's just for us to be able to provide better support to you. And also, if we need to email all of our iPad schools, we have that information readily available via the Tech Readiness. And then there you can see on the bottom right, look at that. There's 5 new fields this year. That's right. When you complete Tech Readiness, you will be able to indicate up to 5 additional users, okay, that will be added to the operational CBT listservs. Okay, next slide. And you know what, you guys are going to have to tell me when the slide changes because I'm not seeing it on my end, which is so fun. So fun.
Slide changed.
Drawing tool.
Yay! All right, there it is, the drawing tool. Okay, so here we have the drawing tool. When Amanda spoke earlier, she noted that Questar is not making significant changes to the test delivery system or to Nextera admin this year. Why? Because we're working on performance. Because the most important thing is that we can deliver the test to the students and the students can be successful. However, there are enhancements that we've been working on for the past 2 years that were in the works already, and so therefore will be available in the operational test this year. And one of those enhancements, one of the most important ones, is the drawing tool. We developed the drawing tool after 2 years of development with Questar. This is the #1 feature that our math teachers throughout New York State, they demanded. They told us about it in December 2016 at a math conference. We heard about it. We got a lot of email from math teachers throughout the state, and they shared with us what exactly they needed. Because in New York State, our students, they're taught that they can creatively arrive at a response. And in doing that, they can use a number line. They can draw shading and circles and pie charts and all sorts of things in order to arrive at the response. And we heard that students can do this on paper. We know they can do it in a paper test, drawing in the margins, etc. So therefore, we are devoted to comparability. A student should be able to do it on computer. So this year, the drawing tool is now live in both the question sampler practice test and the secure browser practice test. The students can have experience with the drawing tool. Okay, so one moment, did we lose internet? Aw. All right, folks, I'm riding blind. We lost internet, but I do have the slides in front of me. So the drawing tool allows a student, as part of the equation editor, which is where a student responds to the computer-based test, the student can use the drawing tool at any time to add up to 5 different drawings to their constructed responses. Okay. One moment. All right. So what we want is we want our schools to go out and try to experience the drawing tool. It did launch during the CBT field tests this spring. And if your school was lucky enough to be assigned CBT Math, then your students too could have experienced the drawing tool. For our schools that had 3rd graders taking the computer-based field tests, almost all those students, they had the drawing tool pulled up and with it. And for, we even saw some older students, like 7th graders, who drew every one of their responses on computer. So it is available. It is an option. A student can continue to use the equation editor buttons, and the student can continue to type their responses. So Clara, is there anything out there?
Heather, do students have to use the drawing tool or can they still use paper and pencil?
You know what, Clara, that is a great question. They can do whatever they want because who are we today in the state? We're flexible. So students can use the drawing tool, but students will also be provided with up to 2 pieces of scratch paper during CBT Math this year. So a student can use either a piece of graph paper or unlined, and then they can draw their response. They can transfer it into the equation editor for their responses, or they can use the drawing tool. So whatever helps the student arrive at that answer easiest, simplest, and best. Thanks, Clara. Okay. All right, Clara, are there any other questions out there? We are riding blind here with no internet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you didn't have that. Heather,
Yep.
there's a couple that are based around this drawing tool. So are they expected to use a mouse to show their work?
Oh, that's a great question. So no, Christy, they're not, but the requirement is that a student in New York State must have access either to a mouse, a touchpad, or a touch screen if it was iPad. And that was the rule in the past. So one thing that we want our administrators to do is and our teachers, is to trust your students. For instance, I told you earlier, I'm nearly 50. I can't use a trackpad to save my life. I travel with a mouse. And we did find that some students preferred a mouse, but we also found that some students preferred the trackpad. And now students can not only use the trackpad and the mouse, but they can also respond with their finger. And in previous years, the only touch screen entry was iPad screens. But this year, Questar has released on October 1st touchscreen support for Windows and Chromebooks. So if your school has purchased those touchscreen devices, they can use their fingers to respond with the drawing tool. So, but trust your students, ask your students. This is where we really, really encourage our schools to take a look at those practice tests, find out what makes your students feel most comfortable. No, they do not need to use the drawing tool. It is up to the student whether or not the student wants to use the drawing tool. It is an option. So there are three different ways that a student can respond in the equation editor. A student can use the equation editor button. A student can type their response. We saw in the first year, for instance, of CBT, that students started to describe their mathematical expressions. For instance, we're typing, I used a number line or to arrive at my response, or they can use the drawing tool. So 3 different ways. Okay. All right. So anything else? Let's see here.
You can go ahead and continue, Heather.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay, and now I'm back online. So let's go to the next slide. This is exciting. Internet has been restored. And I can see what everybody in the field is seeing. So the next slide. Okay, it did not work. Okay, are we on the next slide? There we are. Instructional tools, right? Okay, so after the first year of operational CBT, we heard from our schools that students needed more experience in the classroom with the question sampler response boxes, the secure browser response boxes. They needed the CR boxes to be able to be integrated into daily instruction. So what we provided last year is we provided the equation editor. It's an empty sampler, and it's available on the question sampler as the last option in the row of samplers. So when you go to the question sampler, you first take a look at, you first select subject, then you select grade level, then you select from a drop-down menu, sampler 1, 2, 3, or the empty CR boxes for either math or for English. And so this is an opportunity where teachers can have the students pull up the question sampler in the classroom, and they can provide an answer or a question. So they may have it typed on a smart board, they may be handing it out. One great tip that we heard as we rolled throughout this day is that teachers are giving the students, say, the question for an ELA passage. They're giving it to the students via Google for Education. The students are copying and pasting that into Notepad so that they have it right there on screen as they're typing their responses. Another inquiry that we heard that was quite frankly one of the best things we'd ever heard, we'd never thought of it. We can't think of things, guys, unless you help us, is why don't we offer more than one empty CR box in a row? As you can see here, what we're looking at is we're looking at first the equation editor empty box, and then the ELA empty box, which we just launched about 4 weeks ago. And then you see the review screen where it has one. well, why don't we offer 10? So that students don't need to close out of the question sampler and then relaunch a new question sampler. So that is a great suggestion, and we're actually looking into it because we heard about it from a principal in Rochester. Okay, all right, next question. Or next slide, sorry guys. Okay. Oh, Deanna Romanowski. Clara, I don't know if you see that, but she's got the second bonus question. Deanna, you also win bonus points. They are invisible and will be shipped to you directly. So she is asking, when will schools be required to be all CBT testing? Okay. So many of you have heard the date 2020. Because in 2016, when the state started its computer-based testing initiative, we believed that all schools would be able to transition to all grades, both subjects, CBT by the year 2020. However, in 2017, the first year of operational CBT, as we rolled throughout the state during training that winter and we found out what was happening out there, do our schools have enough devices? Is Smart Schools Bond Act flowing as quickly and efficiently as it needs to for our schools to be prepared for CBT? We found out that in fact it was not, right? That there are funding paths that schools still weren't able to take advantage of, or the money wasn't flowing fast enough, and that maybe there needed to be more internet bandwidth, options created throughout the state. So we backed off. We backed off that 2020 date. And we started referring to it as a goal. But I do want to remind you something that I said earlier. We're not going back. Going back to paper is not an option for this SED administration. We are only going forward, and the commissioner is absolutely committed to computer-based testing. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Just answer that. Okay. All right. So let's talk about other new features for 2019. So we noted earlier a couple times that we're not making substantial new changes to the test delivery system or to the administration system. But we did have some features that were either in the works, such as touchscreen support and the drawing tool. And we also had other features that simply needed to be fixed. So we talked a little bit about text-to-speech and how last year the robots, if there was an internet connectivity issues or a failure, text-to-speech didn't work. And when we think about Questar and we think about the software that Questar has developed, Questar is groundbreaking in that it allows students to test while offline, right? We heard from a large city school district in the middle of the state during our road shows that they had taught the students, if it's red, keep on testing, don't panic. And what they're referring to there is the offline-online indicator that a student sees while logged into the computer-based test. The indicator goes red if a student has lost internet connectivity, but Questar is designed, and they are the ones that developed this technology, that a student can continue testing while offline, and then once internet connectivity is reestablished, then the responses are automatically transmitted to Questar. Well, last year during text-to-speech, that didn't work. However, this year, as noted previously, we're rolling back to a previous solution where text-to-speech will work offline. So I want to make sure we're also going to be working on additional articles to put out there on CBT support, because at every roadshow, we were asked about text-to-speech offline, and schools shared with us the experience that the students found it frustrating. We hear you, we agree with you, and we're going to fix it. And in fact, what's called TTS offline, that's the branding that Questar has given it, it already rolled out in the question sampler and the secure browser in the past 2 weeks. So when you're installing the secure browsers, if you're uninstalling and reinstalling, say in January, then your students, you are selecting voice packs during part of that installation. Okay, so touchscreen support is universal this year. This is pretty big. We noted that we're collecting device information in a variety of ways. It's because all of this information that we collect, it all informs decisions. And so we had been reviewing the district technology plans for the last 3 years, and we found in this past year that touchscreen devices, such as Chromebooks and Windows machines with touchscreens, schools were starting to purchase them more and more frequently. So in seeing that, we realized that Questar needs to support that, because if our schools are buying them, then they should be able to use them for testing. So touchscreen support was released on October 1st. Amanda already spoke about the student response recovery process that's going to be improved. Once all of the software work is completed with the response recovery process, we will be releasing additional information on CBT support so that our schools know that if indeed, if there's a problem this year like there was last year, which we do not believe there will be, we will be ready for it. And that response recovery process will not only be streamlined, there will be less communication required by the schools. We will automatically identify those students. And additionally, you will be able to trust us when we say that those student responses have indeed been recovered. And it will be a process where we're trying to keep principals informed throughout the recovery process. Okay. All right, so we got a question. Here we go. Will the addition of more offline options, should we be checking bandwidth or more this year? Do these options come down locally to the machine at the initial login and possible? No, they do not bog down the network. Okay, so this is coming from Fred Donato. So no, Fred, the offline options, the way that the test is working offline via the software is that it's simply cached to the computer, so it shouldn't be bogging down the test. And I want to remind you that the TTS offline, this is the same way that text-to-speech worked in the first year of operational CBT, which was 2017. And it didn't cause any additional network lag. The test wasn't any larger per the download. So still, students this year, if they're staggering student start times, which is a 2 to 3 minute stagger per, say, 25 to 30 students, and that's the most significant load during CBT, is just that initial test launch. Okay, we've got a Bonnie Nobling. If we have a test read to a student, should we order paper for that student? Yes, you should. So the way that this works, so regardless of how you're delivering test read to a student, there are 3 different options, right, throughout the state. If you're testing on computer, there are 3 options. Your student may have an IEP and a 504 that is so specific that says that that student must test on paper. You're indicating test read quantities. If your student is testing via text-to-speech, you are indicating a test read quantity, because text-to-speech and human delivery of text-to-speech on computer, those are still test read. So when you're ordering your test, you're always indicating test read quantities. You can work out later with the CSE how you're going to deliver that accommodation to the student, but the most important thing to know is that your student is indicated as a test read quantity.
Hi, Heather. It's
Right.
Clara. Can I add a little bit to that? If
Please
you know
do.
that student's going to do text-to-speech via the computer-delivered voice, do not order the paper, though, test read. So test read through the ordering system is for paper copy delivered to your school only. If you know ahead of time, don't put a quantity in there because you don't want the paper, right?
Okay, and Kiara, can you guys go, thank you, Clara. Can you guys go to slide 22 so that folks can see the URL for the question sampler on screen? There we go. And we've got about 10 minutes left. Do we want to take any other questions? Do you want people to raise their hands? Christy?
Yeah, we can go ahead and do that. If anybody has a question that they'd like to talk about, Actually, I'm going to lower hands first because there's a few that are here. If you have a question and you want to talk, please raise your hand and I will look for you. We'll give Heather a couple minutes.
Yeah, this is exciting. This is where we get to like act like we're on a radio show. All right, caller. Do we have any callers out there? Yeah,
so before you do that, how about the question from Flora about E&L in Spanish?
All right. Where is it? I can't see it.
If we have a student
right
who's classified as E&L and we are ordering a Spanish test in Spanish, paper test in Spanish, will they also have a copy of the English version of the test on paper or computer?
All right. So this is great. So when you are ordering your alternate language test, what we're doing is we're automatically sending a paper copy for your proctors, right? Not only that, your proctors are getting a paper copy, but also that student is getting an English paper copy. Because if you remember in the past, in the paper-based world, a student was given a paper Spanish test and a paper English test. In the computer-based world, that student most likely is testing on computer in Spanish, but then has the paper English copy next to them for reference. And this is because, think about screen real estate. We don't have enough screen real estate, especially on iPads, to ensure that we can put a side-by-side translation for a student. However, in the future, if more schools, if we get to a place in the state where we have a larger CBT presence, we can think of more technology cool solutions for those students. But right now, we have to be comparable to paper. So that student has the English copy next to them. However, the student is able to decide, are they going to respond in Spanish or are they going to respond in English, and are they going to respond in a variety? Regardless, when the student's test has been selected for Spanish online, that student is going to a alternate language score. Okay? So we've got a handout there, right?
Yes, and I believe Nicole, I'll unmute you so you can answer your question. I think you also typed it in the box, but I'll unmute you just to be sure. Can you hear us, Nicole? Nicole, do you have audio? Maybe not.
Oh, okay. What was her question?
Okay.
Why don't you read it like you're Nicole? Read it to me.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have audio, so can you clarify the scrap paper usage during math and ELA?
Yeah.
Did you mention
Yes.
page limit?
Oh, good question. All right. So first of all, there are no page limits once a student has requested more paper. All right. So let's go through this. When a student sits down and takes a test for ELA, they are provided with one piece of lined scratch paper. If a student puts up their hand and asks for another piece, that student is given another piece. A student can put up their hand as many times as they want, and the proctor shall never take away that student's scratch paper until the end of the test. A student can sit there and they can acquire a mountain of paper if that's what makes them comfortable, and if that's what the student needs to be successful. And likewise for math, the student is given two pieces of scratch paper, one piece of unlined and one piece of graph. Okay, hope that answers that. Test read information. Okay, so first of all, I want to let everyone know that if you do go out to cbtsupport.niced.gov and you type in TTS, which is the initialism for text-to-speech, you can find a lot of different resources on text-to-speech, but there are 3 different ways that test read is delivered for a student. Okay, so test read is the testing accommodation. The mechanism for delivering it on computer, the most popular, is called text-to-speech. And that is where, ahead of the testing administration and ahead of a student sitting down to take the test, a test administrator is selecting the text-to-speech option as the computer delivery mechanism, right? So the student logs into the test and a player comes up that the student can control to read the test questions and answers to them. The student has headphones on. The student may or may not be testing right along with his or her peers. And then there's also, by popular demand, last year we added test read by human on computer. And what this means is that when we've already told you that when a school's ordering they're indicating test read quantities. So we're already shipping paper tests to you so that you can make those decisions later on down the road as you get closer to the spring administration. How is that student going to test on computer? But for a human read on computer, the human has test form A, because we've already seen that. In the ordering system, you indicated test read quantities, we shipped you a paper test form A. The student has been set on computer to test by human reader. And by virtue of making that selection via the Next Era administration system, that student is also being served Form A. So the student's test on computer and the human reader, their test match. They both have Form A, and the human is reading to the student from the paper copy. We don't want our humans reading off the student's computer screen. Let's give those students a little bit of space, right? Let's not crowd them. And then the student is responding on computer, okay, after being read the test by a human. Okay. What else? Do we have any other hands out there, Christy?
I do not see any other hands, Heather.
All right. Let's see here. Any other questions? Oh, well, here's a really good one from Nicole Holohan. You're asking a question about the pause button. Okay, so first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us all back. I'm going to tell us a story about CBT ELA. You've heard a lot of stories so far, but also in the second week of CBT ELA, some schools started to write to us because they noticed that sometimes when their students paused the test, say to go to the bathroom, they came back and those student responses were missing because we still had the session ID software bug, where it wasn't guaranteed that a student's responses, when paused, were being transmitted up to Questar and actually being married with the right student test record, right? So the student had to go through recovery. So what happened is schools started to ask us, well, hey, we don't feel comfortable with this pause feature. And we responded to them, we agree with you. We don't feel comfortable with it either because we can't guarantee that something isn't wrong with the fact that these student responses continue to go missing. So schools asked if they could put a piece of paper over the computer monitors when students went to the bathroom. They did this because the secure browser doesn't time out, right? A student can be working on scratch paper and they can and that secure browser never times out next to them. So for the same reason, when students went to the bathroom, they simply didn't have the students pause out of the test. This is not the most secure scenario or situation, but our proctors guaranteed us that they were watching those computers. They had the paper over the monitor. We even saw some of this, Clara and I did, when we went out during field testing. That is not going to be the case this year. We can guarantee that we absolutely have the software bug fixed. We know what it was. It was the session ID bug that was not marrying a student's responses after pausing the test with the student's current test session up in the Questar database. So pause feature will work this year on a student's testing device. Okay. Any others? Let's see here. Ginger, Ronaldo. Did you just mention that a student accommodation test read by human reader and then input their answers? Yes. Will there be some students who get an answer sheet? Okay. So Ginger, what really is determining whether or not a student who is in a CBT grade level is testing on paper, if that ever happens. That is only happening because that student has a very specific IEP and 504 plan. And for those reasons on that IEP and 504 plan, it indicates that the student can only test on paper. Maybe there's a very specific testing accommodation that's not available on computer. So that is the only reason, because all students in a CBT grade level must test on computer unless there's an IEP or 504 plan that indicates a student must test on paper, or if a student is in a low incidence language. Now, there are two different ways, two different mechanisms to deliver test read on computer. One is the robots read to the student. That is called text-to-speech. The student is testing with headphones. Or the student is testing with a human reader reading test form A on paper to the student who is testing on computer and responding on computer via keyboard. Okay. test read is always the hottest topic. You know, the first year that we rolled throughout the state was winter 2017. And at the end of November, December, the commissioner had released the rule that that students could use test read via ELA. So it's always been a hot topic. Well, that's all we've got now here today, folks. The slides are out there. You can send us questions. We are always here. We absolutely appreciate all of your support. We're in this together, so we hope that you stay with us. And let's make this the best year of CBT ever. We have more than 300 schools that have already ordered computer-based tests. Woohoo! Right.
And for any of the questions that haven't been answered, I just want to repeat that NYSEB will be putting out questions and answers on CBT support. So if we don't get to your question or a couple more that are coming in right now, we will get back to you guys on those.
Yeah,
we'll
Danielle,
try to stay on for a couple minutes.
We'll respond to you about scribing, okay? Thanks.
Yep.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.